I think coaching as a modality gives a lot of room for Holy Spirit driven conversation that I don't want to talk bad about consulting and teaching. I do a lot of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But man, in those conversations, when that other person is thinking and the two of you are working hard, like there are moments where you see, like literally visually see, and I'm Presbyterian. I am not a charismatic guy. So when I say what I'm about to say, I am not messing around. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Presbyterian. You see the transformation happen in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see where through you, the Spirit has broken through. There's a new insight. There's a new awareness that they have gained, and they are not the same.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the show today. Thanks for tuning in and listening wherever you are and wherever this finds you. Thanks for making this podcast today a part of your day. If it's your first time checking out the show, man, welcome. I'm excited for you to jump on. Picked a doozy, I think, to jump in here. If you're coming back, well, man, welcome on back. Thanks for being a part of the Longer Haul community. Today, jumping on with my good friend, Brian Wallace, who, as you'll hear, is just a phenomenal guy. Loves youth ministry, loves ministry in general, specifically loves coming alongside and helping ministers and pastors kind of find out what's next and work through some things. I have told a lot of folks over the last few months that one of the most impactful things that I think I've ever done in the last 20, 25 years was pursuing a youth ministry coaching certification. Brian is one of the guys who kind of helps lead the charge on that. It'd be hard to express how helpful it was for me, both personally and professionally. You'll hear me, even I mentioned that in the interview today. So if you're kind of feeling a little bit stuck or you've been just curious about coaching, what it looks like, what it is, what it could potentially do for you, how it could help you, or even maybe if you've thought about becoming a certified youth ministry coach yourself, today will be a great episode for you. I think even if it's not something that's on your radar right now, just some really good, helpful things that are shared in this interview today. So don't jump over, don't skip past, like really take the time to listen today. Great interview, great conversation. Brian's such a great guy. Appreciate him so much and his time for coming on. Hey, listen, if you're not subscribed to the show or following the show, wherever you listen, make sure you do that. Jump over to the Super Secret Podcast group over on Facebook as well. Make sure you head over to Longer Haul, jump on the mailing list there. Show notes today will be at thelongerhaul.com/episode 138. So thelongerhaul.com/episode 138. So make sure you head over there as well. Again, great interview today. Excited to jump in. Know you'll appreciate hearing it. So with all that said and out of the way, here's today's interview with Brian Wallace.
Welcome to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast, helping you survive and thrive in youth ministry. And now, here's your host, Jody Livingston.
Well, hey, Brian, thanks for jumping on today. Appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. Got a lot going on.
Thanks for having me on.
So we're going to tackle kind of this topic of coaching today, which I'm excited to tackle. But before we jump in, maybe just take a minute, introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, what you do now, and how you got there.
Yep. So I am a ordained Presbyterian pastor. That was not Plan A in life. Plan A in life was a physics major and a computer science major. That's a story for another time. But
they sound the same.
I know, right? It's very similar. So I finished my undergrad degree, but went straight to seminary, and then was ordained, served a church here in Pittsburgh, about 20 minutes outside of downtown, medium-sized congregation, kind of pretty typical associate job. What 80% of it was youth ministry. So weekly youth group, camp, summer stuff, helping out with, children's ministry stuff here and there. Did that for a while, got connected with Marco Stryker and the Youth Cartel for some of their programs. And then was asked by Marco to step in and develop their coaching training. I'd gone through a previous version of the training, and initially I was super hesitant about developing it. Like, didn't think I really had the skills and the knowledge and the background, but did some reflection on kind of my own gifting and skills and strengths, and realized that I had a lot of opinions about coaching, what was good coaching and what wasn't. And so I did. And then since then, I've continued kind of my own coaching training. I've done stuff with the International Coach Federation, logged over 300 hours at this point of like documented documented coaching work. A lot of that comes from my day job, depending on people's familiarity with the Presbyterian world. Our presbyteries are like our regional associations, and I'm on staff with our regional association here in Pittsburgh. We work with about 120 churches, 300 pastors, 20,000 members, all concentrated at one time. And so been in that role for 8 years. Just the short version is I use coaching skills every single day because I don't know 120 churches that well. I don't know all of our pastors, but I have to go into situations where I'm working with committees and pastors and walk with them without knowing a lot of information. And that's where coaching skills come in so helpful, because it's a given approach that works really well in most of those situations. Not all. We'll talk more about that. So in addition to to my actual coaching work with Youth Cartel, doing the training program for them, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not thinking, okay, what are the questions I need to be asking in this situation?
Yeah. So we met through that program.
Did.
And jumped into that and have done that this year. And we've talked about that. I was hesitant to jump into that for a million of reasons that probably another time. And I have found myself, I don't know how many, every time I talk about it to people, I tell them easily the best thing I've done for myself, both personally and professionally, probably in the last 20 years. Outside of my formal education, practically and personally, just incredibly impactful and beneficial for me. And I will say, and I think this is probably true for the whole cohort that I was with, which I'm guessing is similar for all. I think I misunderstood what coaching was going in. I think I had an idea of what it was going to be. And my hope and goal, my motivation was I wanted to be able to help coach my staff better on my team and volunteers. I wanted to be able to utilize that as a skill set through the podcast and through the longer haul. That's kind of my motivation going in. I don't think I realized how impactful it was going to be across every area of my life, and for sure didn't quite understand what it is. So maybe to kind of put us all on the same page for those listening, could you just kind of define what you would say coaching is?
Yeah. So coaching is similar or has connections to a lot of different things that we're used to: consulting, spiritual direction, mentoring, teaching, etc. The thing that really sets coaching apart is coaching is a coachee, or for the sake of this call, I'm going to use client. I know some people struggle with that word, but in the coaching world, that's what we use, right? It's client directed. So unlike consulting, where, and by the way, I've worked with some really good consultants. I'm not talking bad about consulting. I've worked with great ones. I've done consulting work. But unlike consulting, where a consultant comes in and gathers a lot of information and then makes recommendations, the idea behind coaching is that you assume that the client, the coachee, the person you're talking to, they are the expert in their given situation. And so your job is to lead them through a process where they do the work, right? So you are you're walking alongside them, but you need to know, to be an effective coach, actually very little about their context. But the difference is that you also have to be a little bit more neutral, right? So consultant is going to try and say, here's what I think you should do, right? In coaching, there's really not a place for that. That's not, you can have that thought, but that's an inner thought in the coaching setting. The coaching setting is, how do I help this person discover, in the more secular world, in our world, how do I help this person discern faithfully their next step? And so we talk about ministry coaching specifically, that's the difference, right? We're not hoping that they discover or decide, we're hoping that they discern. And in that sense, coaching, in the way we approach it, is really is exercise in discernment, right? Where two or more are gathered. We believe that this is approach, a conversational technique that helps people discern well. To stress, it is a technique, right? And there are others, and there are other really valid ways of doing things. But the big difference, and Jody, you've been through the program, is a coaching conversation starts out like this. So what would you like to talk about today? And they tell you, and the coach operates out of this position of saying, okay, unless I am confused, I don't ask context questions because they know the answers, right? Unless I'm not tracking, I try and stay away from context. And so on the one hand, coaching is the opposite of consulting, whereas consulting is a lot of data followed by recommendations. Coaching says, look, you're the expert. You're the expert. I'm going to walk with you. We're going to talk this through, right? And a lot of people will say that, hey, I just need to talk this through with someone, right? And what I think really sets coaching apart, and I think particularly in ministry context that you run and that I run, we do a lot of, here's my book, come to our conference, download the information, and then apply it. And that is good, right? I'm not critiquing that. But the difference with coaching is that the coaching is much more of a listening and facilitating model as opposed to a understanding and recommending. And two of the things that we talk about, right? There's 8 things that a coach is supposed to do. But 2 of the ones that are really important is active listening and facilitating awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you are not telling them what they need to know. And that's the thing that a lot of people, and you're not at all alone, a lot of folks who come into our program are like, I've been in student ministry for 15 years. I know all this stuff. I've had all these experiences. Like, I want to help people better. And we're like, that's great. And that's not what this program is.
Yeah. I remember, and I still in my head say this, even as I'm coaching folks now, you guys kept saying, trust the process.
Trust the process.
Because so the way the program worked and works is, for us, we were there for a weekend essentially, and it's just kind of all day for several days. Learn, go coach, learn, go coach, and kind of paired up with somebody through that. And you had us coach several sessions through maybe a professional kind of concern, we'll call it that, and then, or ministry concern. And then the last one was more of a personal, I think. And so coaching kind of spans across the topic.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there being coached by an awesome guy in our program who was learning just like me. And
who knew how much about your context?
Nothing. We're not from the same place in the country.
Right.
We're not from, we're not the same, like, I don't even think we're from the same theological background. Like, draw the lines. He's not serving as a youth pastor. He just works in student ministry. So, but a phenomenal guy. And I remember thinking as the week went, holy moly, like, this is working, like, really, really well. And then I felt like I got picked on a lot in the sessions because I'm, if you know me, I have opinions about a lot of things and not a lot of patience. And then coming out of that, have kind of continued to remind myself, okay, just trust the process. And then we had to do, I think, 6 hours, right, of coaching.
Yeah.
For the certification. And even in that process, for me, coaching a guy, watching him grow across those 6 hours was amazing. And the hardest thing is not giving advice.
Not giving advice. It's so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah. And here's the thing that still drives me crazy. I don't get to ask about what we talked about last time unless they bring it up, right? And so you want to know, but you can't ask unless they say it.
Yeah.
So I think I was really interested. It was really interesting to me how the process played out. And so I say that because I think there's those listening that go, I think I just want advice. And I'll tell you, even the things that I talked about in that weekend, I'd been given lots of advice about those things from a lot of people. None of it was particularly bad, but it really wasn't until I sat across from a guy who was just asking me really great questions and making me answer for myself that I really came away with some pretty clear, direction. It was awesome. It was awesome.
I think one of the unique things about coaching and and not only do I train coaches, not only do I do coaching, I currently have not one, but 2 one-on-one coaches who I utilize. And I say that because I think sometimes our desire, particularly in ministry, is actually a healthy one. At least has very good intent to say, I need the input of others. I need others' wisdom. I don't know enough of this, right? And that is a good impulse. But the thing is, and like even biblically speaking, right? Like, can you imagine Peter trying to give Paul advice on doing ministry with the Gentiles, right?
Right.
It's not going to work. It's not going to work because the context is so different. And so we see in that sense, and what I've learned is that usually I go into my coaching sessions where I'm being coached. I'm like, I have no idea. I need to talk. And my coach is a great guy. He's like, well, just start talking. What's been going on? And an hour later, I'm done.
Yeah.
And like, I look at my notes. I got a page full of notes. There are all kinds of insights, thoughts, conclusions. And my coach will say, stop, write that down. stop, write that down. It's not stuff he's saying, it's stuff I'm saying. He's drawing it out of me, right? He's not sitting there like a bump of love. He is actively engaged. He's firing questions at me. He's, gently challenging me and saying, oh, okay, say more, right? Like, I've heard you say this before, but now you're saying this. Show me where those line up. I'm like, that's a good thought. So it's not passive, but he is really kind of sitting back and letting me drive. And in that sense, the only analogy, there's not a good analogy, but I just taught my 16-year-old to drive, now 17-year-old.
Oh, isn't that fun?
The only analogy that I've come up for coaching is you are in the passenger seat saying, okay, if this is where you want to go, let's ask this question. Let's turn right?
Yeah.
And then let's see, good. Right? Or if you want to go right, go. It's not a perfect analogy, but that's the difference. Is that you're sitting in the passenger seat along for the ride, is they're figuring.
How would you explain for the listener? Because I would imagine someone listening to you talk about that, especially how you just described it, is sitting there thinking, this sounds a lot more like counseling.
Yeah. Great. Yep.
What is the difference?
That is great. So the easiest difference is this, that coaching is really at its best, like forward focused, right? It's on identifying, discerning, imagining even a different future or a new future, right? Counseling tends to be more, how do I deal with the stuff in my life, past and present, so that I can be healthier in the future? Okay. You end up crossing over, and this is where it gets tricky, right? Because in fact, we're doing a training right now, and I was talking this week about emotional center questions, right? How do you in coaching engage people's emotions? And the question comes up of like, yeah, but if I ask somebody, how does that make them feel? Like that feels like a counseling question, right? And my response was twofold. One was kind of flippant, which is, look, therapists do not have the monopoly on asking people about their emotions. Normal people are allowed to ask about emotions too, but very careful is that if you immediately pick up that this person is trying to sort out their pain in a conversation with me, then we're out, right? That is not my specialty. And part of what I love is I'm not trained as a therapist, so I cannot do it, right? So I don't know how to do that. And so I actually don't have a lot of trouble avoiding the temptation to do it because I don't know how to do it. Like, I don't know what the end goal is. So, but what I've learned is if I think there's an issue that someone's really struggling with, I will say, it's particularly if I know that they're seeing a therapist, I'll ask, look, have you talked to your therapist about this? If their answer is yes, I'll say, okay, what did they say? What came out of that conversation, right? Keeping it forward directed helps you stay out of that lane. It like helps you stay in the right lane of not getting into counseling. Because like anything in the ministry world, right? We don't want to do what we're not trained and equipped and qualified to do. Yeah. But the key is future focused, identifying a future path versus kind of dealing with present reality, pain, challenges, relational struggles, internal struggles, etc.
Yeah. So let's talk then a little bit about what a coaching process would look like for someone. So someone listening is saying, okay, this sounds interesting. Maybe something I should do or want to do. They reach out for coaching, either to me or to you or someone else. Yep. Usually, at least this is kind of where I've landed so far. It starts with like a short little discovery call of some kind to make sure it's a good match, kind of identifying some areas or goals. Then you get into the first kind of session. You mentioned earlier, it starts with a basic question. What do you want to talk about? From there, then, what does that look like? Yeah.
Well, and you recapped it really well, right? One of the first things to know is that not every coach is a fit for every leader, right? It's like anything, there are bad fits. And so exactly to your point, in 2023, I was enrolled in a program that included coaching, and I was sent a list of like 10 bios of people who I could pick from. And I picked out a couple and I emailed them, and I zeroed in on one pretty quick. And I was like, I think this is the right one. But as you said, we had a 30-minute phone call. No money changed hands. There was no contract or agreement signed. It was strictly, let me find out about you, you find out about me. And it goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
I have been in situations where people have reached out to me for coaching. I've had the initial call and been like, nah, not going to work, right? For whatever reason, and that's fine. But I think the thing, especially people who are interested in being coached, finding that fit is critical. Yeah. And it's totally appropriate to be like, I'm really grateful for your time. Don't think that this is a fit, right?
Yeah.
And most likely if the coach is good, they'll be like, yeah, it's kind of thinking the same thing, right? Like you can tell. There needs to be just a level of comfort because one of the coaching competencies cultivates trust and safety.
Yeah.
And if in whatever in that first conversation, that trust and safety isn't there, you should not be coached by that person. Just full stop. You don't even have to have a good reason. You can just be like, nope, I've tried to pair people for stuff and they've been like, Brian, it's a no. And I'm like, okay, like done it. So I think that's the biggest thing is not to underscore, like not to sell short the value of the fit piece.
Yeah.
I think the big thing for coaching is if you're going to go into it, you've got to kind of figure out what it is you want. If you're just like struggling, okay, maybe the coaching question is, I don't know why I'm struggling, but I need to figure it out, right? Because I can't move forward in ministry right now because I don't know what's holding me back, right? And that may be a coachable question. It may not. It may find out, no, you are dealing with personal battles and demons that are not coachable. They require other forms of intervention and responses. That's fine. The outcome of one coaching session I did, we signed up for 6 sessions. At the end of 2, the guy was like, you know what? Forget it. Like, I know what I need to do. And it's not coaching. It's like, I've put off seeing a therapist because I don't want to admit I'm broken. Coaching has shown me I'm broken. I need to get a therapist, right? Future focused. This is what I need to do. But that guy, we canceled, refunded in the last 4 sessions, and off he went, to see a therapist. But that's the thing. It's kind of have a big picture, but then also to understand, like each session, we tend to, in our brainstorming, at least I do, but it's way more than we can chew. People are like, do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And anyone who's listening who's ever gone to any youth ministry conference knows you sit there for 4 days and you come back and you have so many notes, right?
Yeah.
And then the parent who's supposed to bring snack doesn't show up on Sunday night. And everything you learned is out the window because there's no snack, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference in coaching is that like it is an ongoing process over time. Yeah. And what happens so often is like I'll go into a session with my coach and, under the auspices or in a situation that I'm in now, I was provided coaching because I was in a new role. And in this new role, as part of the payment for it, a coach was included, right? So the big picture was to help me be an effective leader in this transitional season. That was it. Then under that kind of bigger framework, each session I was like, okay, I got a big meeting coming up in March. I want to talk through that. I got a big presentation in September. I want to talk through that. We got to figure out what to do with this. I want to talk through that. All under that bigger umbrella, right? But the best thing is there was one session where I started talking and I didn't talk about any of that stuff, right? Because there was something going on with me personally that day. Yeah. That was the most important thing. And I wasn't going to get to my preferred future until I sorted that out. Yeah. And so the question in that meeting was, what's next for you once you're out of this transitional role? That wasn't on my radar, but it just came out naturally. A good coach will let me go, right? He's like, and he asked me, is this what you want to keep talking about? And I was like, yeah, I know it's not what I said I wanted to talk about, but this is what's most important. Okay.
That never happens.
Right? Keep going. Yep. So yeah. And so that's the thing is like, I think people coming in, you need to have an idea of where you're going, but you don't need to rigidly hold to.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think, would you say that most sessions, and I'm asking for some clarification for those listening, most sessions are standalone, like you're saying, or do you kind of come in with somebody and you're like, okay, we're going to talk through this for the next 6 sessions?
So at the end of the day, right, it's really whatever the coachee brings to that session. And what's interesting, and what you said, right, you do one session and 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, you meet with them again, you're dying to know. Like, how'd the meeting go? How'd the conversation with the senior pastor go? They're like, so today I want to talk about volunteer recruitment. And we're like, what? Like, no, I want, like, come on, give me the news. And what's interesting so often is, at the end of the session, I'll be like, hey, look, we talked about that. What happened? And they're like, oh, yeah. And it's been so long that it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter anymore. They're like, yeah, I talked to him. It's no big deal. Or I got out of that coaching session. I went in to talk to my, my partner, my spouse, my volunteer, whatever. And they told me it was a crappy idea. So I didn't even bother. Right. Yeah. And that's the thing about like the freedom in coaching is just, hey, whatever is that day. Yeah. Let's have a bigger picture. But whatever is that day, that's the most important thing.
How often does somebody sit in one of your coaching sessions and begin it by saying, help me figure out how you do this?
So often, but not nearly as much anymore, because I have become extremely diligent in setting clear expectations. So I tell people, so right now I'm serving as a one-on-one coach. We have a next-gen leaders cohort that we're running. We got 11 people from across our region. I'm serving as a one-on-one coach for 3 of those folks. And I sent them a document ahead of time. And I was like, this is going to be the first question, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't stop them from asking.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop them from asking. But my people now have been really long enough that they know how to get around it and try and trick me and be like, well, but what I think is important, right, is like there is a spot in coaching for us to affirm people's own wisdom and insights.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it, is because sometimes I'll be like, look, ideas, but let's talk about you first.
Mm-hmm.
And so often, if I actually think by the time I'm done with a 30-minute, 45-minute coaching conversation, sometimes as the coach, I'm like, actually, I do have something that could be helpful.
Yeah.
But I wait, right? I wait until the end. And here's why. You give better advice the more you listen.
Mm.
So if you jump in early, right? If you're a couple minutes in, and we'll pick volunteer recruitment because it's a constant theme, right? And I'm like, oh, I got all these ideas, et cetera, et cetera. Your advice, even if you give it, isn't going to be as good because you didn't listen. Whereas if you give them 45 minutes for them to figure out their path, to be empowered, to be like to figure out what they're going to do and they get passionate about, and you can be like, hey, you baked the cake. Here's like some sprinkles that might help. Like it's so much more effective if we let people get the personal buy-in.
Yeah.
And just a quick example. There's so many things about this example that aren't a good idea. I'm going to put all that out as qualified. So a guy who's my direct successor at the church I served signed up to do one of the cohort groups that I was one of the one-on-one coaches for. There were a couple of us working with a group, and he said to me, he's like, I want you to be my one-on-one coach. And I was like, for a lot of reasons, that's not good, and here's why. He goes, I understand all that. I still want you to be my one-on-one coach because I trust you, etc. So I went into that. I was like, this is going to be really bad. This is going to be really bad. What I learned from that experience of coaching somebody, and again, I would never recommend that. I'd never recommend you coach a successor. I would never recommend you coach a close friend. So I'm putting those out there. What I learned from that experience, though, was same church. We're very similar in personality. Man, effective coaching showed me how a different leader at a different time and place needs to approach things differently. It was amazing to me how often I would go into a session. He would say, here's what I want to talk about. And I'm like, I got 4 pieces of advice. We don't even need to have this session. And by the end of the session, I'd be like, yep, 5 years ago, I was right. Not anymore. People have changed, systems have changed, churches have changed, times have changed. And so that, more than anything, taught me to like really like tamp down my own advice. Because if I can't give good, quick advice to a successor of mine who's serving the same church, who's very similar in personality, it was an incredibly humbling experience that made me a better coach. Because so often I'd be like, yeah, no, what I did when I was there would not work for you. You're a different leader and it's a different time.
Every youth pastor listening right now, or youth minister listening who has a senior pastor who used to be in youth ministry is feeling the words you're saying and wishing that their senior pastor would have the same revelation. Because there's a lot of advice given.
Yeah. And, you know, I think part of where I learned that lesson was with my senior pastor at the time, who stylistically was very different than me and who could name it, right? Who said, you and I are not going to do things the same way. That's fine. I want to make sure that we have a shared set of values of what's important. And like that's been super helpful even in like doing coaching work. I mean, like, look, don't focus on what they're doing. Don't focus on the method. As the coach, keep an eye on their mission, what their articulated mission is. And when you think about it that way, when you realize that like it changes you and it makes you a better coach. And the transformation, the growth that people have when they figure out what they want to do, when it's their idea, when they have the buy-in, it's night and day difference.
Yeah. You've talked about a lot of things in regard to coaching, and you and I have talked a lot, even outside of this, of kind of your own skill set, your background. Why But you've spent so much of your time in coaching, being a coach, becoming a better coach. Why? Why is that such a big deal for you personally?
So there's kind of two reasons. So anybody who is familiar with Simon Sinek's Start With Why, I am a big fan, and I couldn't answer that question until I listened to that book. And I was out for a walk one morning, and what is my why? And what I came down to is I want every person I meet and know to know two things: to know that they are valued and capable. And what I've learned about coaching is that coaching does those things so well for me, because in a coaching session, they are valued. I am taking time, right? I am spending time with this person in exclusive one-on-one conversation. But it's that capable part, right? Of no, you don't need my advice. Maybe some finishing touches you need my advice. You don't need my advice. You need somebody who's going to push you and encourage you along the way. And coaching for me really sums up that valued and capable. It's really how I find that I can instill that value of mine, my why, the best for them. I think the broader, the more theological question, right, is I'm, because of my story, physics major, ending up in ministry, right? Discernment's a huge thing for me. And when I asked for advice on just where to go to seminary, I talked to 3 different groups of people, and I got 3 profoundly different answers. Not similar, incompatible answers. Okay. And I remember thinking, all of these people are wise and want the best for me. What is going on? No one was trying to lead me astray. All these people affirmed my call to ministry and said, yes, we see it. We affirm it. This is what you should do. And I thought back on that experience a lot because the answer and what fixed it was actually the third person I went to who said, why is it that you're going to seminary? I said, because I want to be a pastor. He said, okay, what do you mean by that? I said, look, I want to teach people and I want to care for people. He said, okay, if that's what you want, here's where you should go, right? And it ended up being good advice, but it was good advice because he asked me what I wanted and reflected on my sense of fun. And so in that respect, right, I think coaching as a modality gives a lot of room for Holy Spirit-driven conversation. That I don't want to talk bad about consulting and teaching. I do a lot of that stuff, right? Yeah. But man, in those conversations, when that other person is thinking and the two of you are working hard, there are moments where you see, literally visually see, and I'm Presbyterian. I am not a charismatic guy. So when I say what I'm about to say, I am not messing around. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Presbyterian. You see the transformation happen in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see where through you, the Spirit has broken through. There's a new insight. There's a new awareness that they have gained, and they are not the same. And I've seen that happen enough. That it's happened to me enough of where I've been coached. I'll never forget, I went into a coaching session. I was leaving my last church. I was an emotional wreck. And we're 25 minutes in, and finally my coach looks at me, and I just said out loud, I was like, I need this departure to not be all about me. And it was, again, not Saul, scales from the eyes on the road to Damascus.
Yeah.
But it was completely orientation shaped. I was like, oh my gosh, coach didn't tell me that.
Yeah.
She fired great questions at me that got me there. But I came out of that being like, oh man, that was not. And so, that's really it, is that for me, that modality lets me uphold my values the best. And for me, it's where I've seen the Spirit work and change people.
Yeah.
That has transformed ministries.
How do you think personally, you've been a coach for a long time. If you to say for yourself personally, I love the why, I love all those things. What kind of things have you seen? How has it forced you to grow yourself? What have you learned about yourself as a coach?
I think the number one thing that being a coach teaches you is humility. Man, there are so many times, and there's a difference in coaching between not thinking things and not saying things. We can't help but think things, of what we would do. That's fine. Right? That is, you're not going to go off that. What it is, so many times I've been wrong. I was like, oh, this is where we're going to end up. I'm 2 minutes in, we're talking. I'm like, that's all you need to do. Come on, we could save time. And at the end, I'm like, that's not where we ended up at all. And I think that's the most thing it's changed for me. It's just this profound sense of humility.
Yeah.
And realizing that what a lot of people need, a lot of people, what we do a lot in ministry, and we mean it well, is when colleagues and friends of ours are getting beaten up. And that happens, right?
Yeah.
It happens in big churches, small churches, conservative churches, progressive churches. There's not a church I've been connected to where people don't get beat up. And sometimes they get beat up because they do something dumb. Sometimes they get beat up because they're in a system that's rough and is not functioning in a healthy way. All those things can be true at the same time. And what we want to do is we want to say, look, you are good. You are good at ministry. I don't know what's wrong with them. End of the day, that's not helpful.
Mm-mm.
It's not helpful. Whereas helping them identify the agency they do have in a situation, that's what helps people figure it out. Sometimes the answer is get out.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes the answer is this is an intractable situation that you need to leave, right? And so for me, I think one of the frustrations, so Marco, who you know and I know, one of the things that Marco taught me, and I know he wasn't original, but I give him credit for it every time, said, Brian, in every situation, find your 10%. Where are you responsible for the situation you're in?
Yeah.
And, even if it's 90% the other person's fault, even if it's 90% your church is treating you like crap, whatever, you probably have a 10%, unless it's literally you are powerless and being abused. There are always exceptions. But in most situations, you can find 90% of where you do have agency. And coaching really helps people claim that in a way that I think is healthier than just, what we want to do is we want to give people a hug and say, look, I love you. I'm sorry you're going through this. But what's better is after a 30-minute hard conversation to say, I love you. I know this is hard. You're going to get through this. And look at this. You already figured out a plan.
Yeah.
So it helps me affirm people in a way that doesn't just feel emotionally. I'm like, oh, I can't believe it. I feel so bad for you. There's a place for that. But I like it even more when it's like, I feel bad for you, but man, you got a plan. Go do your plan. Let's figure it out if this will work or not.
Yeah. One of the things that I realized in the weekend that we did for the certification, that initial cohort weekend, and I remember telling my wife, I remember telling Sarah when it was back, or even while we were there calling, I think I could look back, the last 24 years of student ministry, and I could think of specific moments and times where I'm like, man, I wish I had known then and had access to a coach at that time in that season. Because what I found in that weekend is I was talking about things that I was dealing with at the time that were very much tied to me not really having worked through and had done counseling, okay, but had not worked through some of those things on a professional level to really understand why things were happening now the way they were, or at the time. And I think what I love about the coaching process, even, which I don't know that I had thought much about, is very scalable in the sense that I could have been a youth pastor with 10 kids in my youth group.
Yep.
Coaching would help me. I could be a youth pastor with 100,000 kids in my youth group.
Yep.
Coaching would help me. And because it's client driven, it's always relevant.
Yep. It's client driven and it's context independent, right? It does not depend on a given context.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, again, I've said it, I'll say it again. It's so helpful for me.
Yeah. I think the thing where coaching can come in. So if people are listening and are like, wait, like, do I need a coach? Would now be a good time for me to engage. I think where coaching is often best utilized is when someone feels stuck. Yeah. Like that's kind of the magic. It's not magic. That's, to me, some of the most applicable thing of like, just feel stuck. Coaching is good at getting people unstuck, right? If you have a very clear idea of what you want next in ministry, I think a coach can be helpful, in those situations, but often the coaching's most helpful in determining what is going to be next, getting you unstuck, right?
Yeah.
Where I think consulting, just to give an example where I would actually go consulting over coaching. When I admitted the church that I was at in my 8th year going into my 9th year, to be fully blunt, I was bored, right? I'd been there for 8 years, 9 years. At this point, I got like the youngest siblings of the oldest youth group kids I had are now in my high school group, right? I have moved whole family systems through. We have Sunday night is bumping along. We fixed some major kind of challenges there. Things are healthy, going well. And I'm like, I really love this. And I really have a clear sense I'm supposed to stay here. But man, I need people who are smarter and have seen systems like this to give me some ideas. Like then we brought in consultants.
Yeah.
And in that process, the consulting was really helpful because they did the 4 days of listening and the endless questionnaires I had to fill out. And then they came to us with that stuff. And then the question was, okay, what are your insights? Now let's coach you through how you implement.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes coaching is a follow-up to consulting. It can be really helpful, right? But if I had backed up and been like, man, like I feel stuck, things are not working, I need to chart a new course, right? And that's actually, thinking back on it, at the 7-year mark, that was where actually the coaching was really helpful, working with a coach, because that helped me figure out what I needed to do.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're at a place where things are bumping along and you're rolling and you're like, okay, how do I not crash this plane? That may be more of a consulting question.
Yeah.
But if you feel stuck and things are not quite lining up, that's a great coaching question.
Yeah. I think back to that, again, that weekend, I spent most of the sessions kind of talking through something that I was just stuck on. Like I stuck, maybe not stuck. I couldn't figure it out. Like I think I could identify, hey, here's the problem.
This
is what's going on. This is what I'm doing. I just don't know why. And I don't know how to get past it. So maybe that is stuck. But I could articulate it. And it was ridiculously helpful. So helpful, right? I don't know that I would have kind of been able to figure that out without the coaching and without the weekend, with the process. And again, we were learning together,
Yeah.
Kind of coaching it all.
I mean, the guy you worked with was not an expert coach.
No.
Right?
No.
Just
we had met 10 minutes before the first session, probably.
Yeah.
It was great. And again, awesome guy, man. Turned out to be just a great thing. Ryan, I want to be mindful of your time. If folks so I think there's two kinds of people listening. One is maybe you're listening and you're thinking, gosh, I'd like to look into what it looks like to become a certified coach. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So the coaching world is full of all kinds of different programs, trainings, opportunities. Like everyone's kind of got their thing, right? We at the National Association of Youth Ministry Certification, which is the Youth Cartel's training wing, we're the same, right? Just going to be blunt, we're the same. We developed our own program from the ground up. But here's what I would say. When you get into the coaching world, a lot of coaching training is designed for executive coaches for business.
Mm-hmm.
On one level, there's nothing wrong with it. The skill set should be the same. The basic approach should be the same. But I do think there's a different foundation that we're working with in a ministry setting that can be helpful to have that perspective inform the training you're doing.
Yeah.
And so what we try and do with the training that the Youth Cartel sponsors through the association is we try and do two things. We try and align the training that we do with what the International Coach Federation, which is the international accrediting body for coaching, does. And as you know, right, those 8 competencies that you guys had to learn and reword, those are the standard competencies that people around the world learn in the coaching world. The thing about it is that go through the ICF program, to go through an International Coach Federation accredited program is a lot of hours, 65 classroom hours. It's 100 coaching hours, a lot of which have to be paid. Like I think 80% paid. And you have to go through a program called mentor coaching. So you're instantly talking about thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours to get to that first level. The program that we do, I think, is a good intro. It's a good intro to coaching. It gets you some basic core skills, and then it lets you figure out whether, okay, I want to take this to the next level. It's worth putting $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $10,000 in to being trained through a ICF program. Nope, this is a helpful skill set. Glad I have it, but I'm not going to put more into it. That's what I think the value of our training is that it's intentionally designed to be an intro program. We do give you a certification that says you've done it and you've completed the supervised part of it, right? It's not just training. I actually get to hear you coach. We debrief it. So I know that you're at least base level competent in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But that to me is the difference, is that we intentionally engage a ministry perspective and we align ourselves with the International Coach Federation so that you're well set up if down the road you want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's my best synopsis of what I think makes our program kind of unique in the coaching space.
Yeah.
And it's more affordable.
Yeah. And if they wanted to find more information on that, where's the best place to go?
The best place to go is actually go to the Youth Cartel's website or go to ymcert.com. And you can find information in both those places about this certification.
That's great. And then if you're listening and you want coaching, there's options there, right?
There's options. Yep.
Obviously Brian is a great coach. You coach me. We didn't mention that. But so we've done coaching post certification, even do that. You can go to thelongerhaul.com. There's a get coaching spot at the top and grab that and sign up for the discovery call. We can chat through that. That's probably the easiest place to start since you're listening to the podcast already.
Yeah.
And then kind of go from there. Again, I think having an idea of what you would hope to get from coaching will help you regardless of the direction you go. So you're not just kind of, I didn't have anything else to spend my money on. So
exactly.
Throwing my conference dollars at this. And so we go from that. Brian, any last thoughts or anything that I didn't ask that I should have?
Nothing that comes to mind right away. I think the only point that I would drive home again is like the beauty of coaching is that oftentimes you don't realize how much you needed it until you've done it.
Yeah.
And so like I would encourage your listeners, particularly, right? Like if they've been listening to the podcast for a while, they don't know me from a hole in the wall. They listen to you, right? And even if you're sitting there and you're like, man, I don't know, like try it, right?
Yeah.
Like give it a shot. 30 minutes, no commitment, no money. Just find out if it might be a fit. I've worked with coaches on and off for over a decade, and easily been some of the most transformative stuff. It was a little awkward at first, like, okay, how's this going to be? But now, like, as I said, I like coaching so much. I have two people, who I work with in different areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's my, like, if you've never tried it, give it a shot. It really can be transformative in your ministry, and in a real good way to become more discernfully empowered is what I would say is what I love about the coaching process.
Yeah. And you can vouch that I don't suck at it.
You don't suck at it.
So that's all
I have listened to your calls. I can attest that you know your competencies and you execute them.
I was nervous about this. I told my wife, I said, so I'm interviewing Brian today for the podcast talking about coaching. I'm really nervous he's going to ask me more questions than I ask him, and I'm going to end up bearing my soul on a podcast.
Well, so what I was thinking is that if it was slow going, I'd just be like, okay, Jody, what do you want to talk about today? and our listeners could then listen to us do a coaching session live.
Yeah, that sounds like a horrifying idea.
Horrifying, right?
Maybe another day.
Yeah, maybe another day. And again, like not a great use of coaching because part of coaching is cultivating trust and safety. So doing a coaching, but yeah.
If you're listening and you've listened this far, here's what I'll say to you. Again, I'd love for you to look into coaching. I'd love to come alongside you and help you if I can and work through that if that's something you're able to, willing to do. But beyond that, even if it's not me, I just can't express enough how much value and help coaching has been for me. And so finding a coach, particularly one who's been certified, who's not just going to give you advice like we've talked about, is going to be really important for you and really helpful. And so, again, if you're interested in that, head to thelongerhaul.com. At the top of the page there, get coaching. You can kind of set that up. Otherwise, we'll put links for the Youth Cartel and for the youth ministry certification there in the notes as well. So if you're interested in that, you can go check those things out. Brian, thank you so much, man. I know you're a busy guy. Appreciate you coming on and for putting up with me now all these months.
Well, great to great to be on. And always good to talk about coaching. And because, as you said, there's a lot of folks out there who are like, yeah, I'm a coach. But what they really want to do is give you advice and say their book. And so that's my, just as you look into the coaching world, there's some due diligence and caution that I would encourage.
For sure. Love that.
But I can vouch that Jody knows his stuff.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
We'll catch you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hey, well, there you have it. Again, great conversation. I appreciate Brian so much. Listen, I would love to talk to you more about what it might look like for you to get some help and taking advantage of some coaching, if that is something that you're interested in and think that you would be helpful for you, wherever you are and whatever your context is. Again, you can jump in, just a 30-minute conversation and kind of see if that's a good fit or not. Head to thelongerhaul.com. There underneath the menu, you'll see a get coaching option. You can jump in and look at that. There'll be a link for that in the show notes as well. But even if not, man, listen, we want you to thrive. I want you to do well where you are. I want you to succeed. I want you to love what you're doing. I think and believe that coaching can be a real impact for you in that. Again, for me, even as a part of the process being coached, coming out of that, have continued to have some coaching myself. Just been an incredible blessing in my ministry, in my life. And so this isn't just a sales pitch. This isn't me just trying to kind of jump in and get you to do something else. I really think it's something that can be helpful for you. So be sure to head over to thelongerhaul.com and look for that get coaching option there underneath the menu. Jump on and schedule that call. I'd love to chat with you on that. Again, all the show notes today over at thelongerhaul.com/episode 138. thelongerhaul.com/episode 138. Sure, subscribe, following the show, jump into that Facebook group over there and get on the mailing list. Listen, some great episodes coming down the pipe here. If you didn't hear the last one, we talked to Zach Wyatt about loneliness in youth ministry, which is just an incredible problem that is pervasive. And so make sure you go back and listen to that one. A good one's coming up here in the next couple of weeks as well, or the next few weeks. So make sure you are back here listening. So anyway, thanks again for tuning in today. We will catch you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast. Before you go, hit that subscribe button to keep these conversations coming. For notes, resources, and to join our community, swing by thelongerhaul.com. Stay encouraged, keep making a difference, and remember, we're in this for the longer haul. Catch you on the next episode.